Okay, our final policy of the policy block today, and we're going to cover draft policy 2019-17, returned addresses to the 410 pool. Shepherds Allison Wood and Alyssa Moore. They look like that. I'm going to do the, actually, this is not a recommended draft policy. What am I doing? I'm going to turn it over to them and let them cover it. It is a very interesting policy. But as it is not recommended draft, it is no chance that you won't see it again. They're just working on it right now. It's not necessary. It will not be sent to the Board of Trustees between now and the next meeting, but it's to get more input from you to help the AC guide its development. Come on up. Yeah, I don't look like that.
Thank you, John. I just want to reiterate that this is a draft policy, not a recommended draft policy, which is what you've heard previously. And so the Advisory Council really wants your input at the end of this discussion so we know how to proceed. So my name is Alice Wood, and my very helpful co-shepherd is Alyssa Moore, seated over there. All right, so this is draft policy 2019-17. And the spirit of this policy is that populating the wait list is somewhat inconsistent and unreliable, and is there a better way to do this? All right, so we would just make some very minor changes to the statement, but it's a very major change to the way that we do business. So the IPv4 pool dedicated would be, so the incoming addresses returned from ARIN members would be returned to a pool that then facilitates IPv6 address space. And the waitlist then would be, so I want to say this really clearly, the waitlist would then be decommissioned, and all current requests that are sitting on the waitlist would be grandfathered in. Okay, so I just want to say it one more time. The waitlist would be decommissioned, and those that are sitting on the waitlist today would be grandfathered in. All right, this has gone through staff and legal already. So the policy can be implemented as written, and you guys have that. So a few things about that. So the 4.10 pool was started in February of 2011, and only 4% of that pool has been used. Right? So there's a lot of address space in there, and it is projected to last more than a few years. If this policy is implemented, ARIN would be unable to provide IPv4 address space to existing customers, new entrants, anyone. There would be no wait list. So the option to people wanting to obtain space would be on the transfer market. Okay, so I'm going to skip over the next slide, which is our thank you slide, because for discussion points, I pulled some statements right from the PPML, and I wanted you guys to see those statements to encourage discussion, because like I said, this is just a draft policy, and we really need your input to further or not further this policy. So just to read them really quick, could this policy help with fraud? Would this sequester space where it cannot be used? If it goes into this, would we be taking or receiving space back in that couldn't then be given back to the community? Is this the end of the free pool era? And populating the wait list today is haphazard and unpredictable. So I'm going to go back to myself and Alyssa, and we very much appreciate your discussion questions.
All right, the award of the day for most colorful slides clearly goes to Alyssa and Allison. All right, we'll start this time with the far microphone, who is declining. We'll start with the front center microphone.
Kathy Aronson. I just have a little nit. Could we not call it a pool, like an IP address pool, or something more specific than a pool? Because I'm not sure how I feel about the policy, but I think that that's not clear, so I just...
Yes, thank you.
Rear center microphone.
Kevin Locke, QTS. I support this. I think the 4.10 pool is great, and I support its mission. I actually would really prefer that the addresses not be issued at all and that ARIN start building a pool of addresses for future use, things we haven't imagined yet that we may need down the road 5, 10 years from now. I think the waiting list is kind of misleading. Those that need larger groups of addresses, they really should be going to the efficient open market to acquire those. And going back to ARIN and putting them on the wait list for 2 years is kind of misleading them about what they really should be doing right now.
Fire microphone.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. I don't think this should be limited to the 4.10 pool, reserved IP pool. We have many reserved pools, and they all, quite frankly, have even far more important aspects. The micro allocations for critical infrastructure pool, IP pool. I believe this should be expanded to all of the reserved pools that ARIN has. And what I think it should really be about is about making sure that these reserved pools receive priority, that space that comes back allows those pools to get refilled so that they aren't drained down over the waiting list. So what those numbers may be, if it hits 20%, you get X amount back, whatever it may be. But all of those reserved pools are just as important as each other. They should all be taken care of with this policy. And it should just be to the priority of, but we should not just stall all of the space in a pool that is never going to get touched.
Great.
Thank you.
Front center microphone.
David Farmer, University of Minnesota, ARIN-AC. I kind of like what I just heard Kevin talk about. However, I will note that none of the reserve pools are in any danger at this time. They probably have many years before we have to worry about this. When that time comes, what Kevin's talking about seems to make sense to me. So I do not support this policy, particularly at this time. The waiting list is doing useful things for some people. Yes, it's limited to who it's useful for, but as was stated earlier, we're dealing with what is possible. We're in the art of the possible, and making sure everybody can have access to resources through the waiting list is not possible today.
Thank you, David. Rear center microphone.
Owen DeLong, ARIN-AC. Can we go back to your questions?
You betcha. If you just advance it one.
Advance it one.
Yeah. This one?
Oh, that's an eye chart from here. End of the free pool era, probably, but this isn't the policy to do it. Will it sequester addresses? Yes, it absolutely would, and for that reason, I oppose the policy. Could this help with fraud? I can't see how it's going to enable fraud, but it probably has some way that somebody will figure out. But I don't think it makes things generally worse or better in regards to fraud. I think overall that the status quo is far superior to what is proposed here.
Thank you, Owen. Far microphone.
Hi. My name's John Petrakis with Stratus Networks, and I'm here with I'm one of the owners, and I'm here with the other owner, Kevin Morgan, and one of our engineers, Tom Pruitt. And if anybody agrees with some of the things I'm about to say, please come talk to us. This is our first time attending this, and we're learning an awful lot. Thank you for being patient with me in advance here. So what I want to talk about doesn't directly relate, but it indirectly relates to what you guys have up here that you're considering, because it would end the pool. And we did it the right way at Stratus Networks when we started. We're an ISP serving businesses, internet services, and other communication needs. And when we started, we asked for a /24. We got a /24. Then we needed more IP. We went to a /22 and then to a 21. We ended up with a little over a /20, and we were eligible for a /19. By then, there was a waiting list. We put ourselves on the waiting list, and no fault of our own. We didn't create any fraud. In fact, the more I talk to people, we did things by the book compared to a lot of other organizations. A lot of other organizations figure out how to sneak more IP addresses through other means. we can prove our justification. We would welcome an audit to prove our justification. And so we were on the list, and then because somebody else committed fraud, you guys came out with a ruling and first killed the wait list, but then re-implemented it with a rule of a /20. I would advocate that you keep the wait list and you grandfather the 30 companies or so like ourselves that were on that wait list, and then if you want to kill it after you honor who was on the wait list, then fine, do so. But we shouldn't be punished. We spent a lot of time on that wait list, from being a couple few hundred people on that wait list all the way nearly to the top, and then you killed that wait list with the restriction also as a /20. We shouldn't have to go to the secondary market at this point. We're not, no offense to our friends at Google and AT&T and Amazon who can afford and are big companies using a lot of IP addresses, that it seems like you put this rule in place to protect the little companies. Well, we're kind of caught in the middle. We're not tiny asking for a /24 anymore, but we're not asking for a /8 either. And so we would advocate, one of your tenets is to be fair. And we don't think we were treated fair in this circumstance. So I'm not only against this particular item that you're voting on and debating, but I'm also going to try to put a motion or work with the proper people here to put together a proposal that you get rid of the /20 and you grandfather the folks that were on the list and put them back on it. And then if you want to make your changes, you can. So sorry for the long speech. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming to share your views.
If I could ask
John?
a question back. I would highly recommend, if you want to make a change to policy, anyone who wants to talk about the wait list and the limit, the max size limit, you can't have more than a /20 worth of IP addresses, seek him out. Good opportunity. I will ask one question. When we suspended issuance from the wait list and we posted that to the community and had the AC working and the AC put its message out on the mailing list, did you file any comments against the change to put a /20 limit in?
My engineer is nodding his head affirmatively.
You did? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
And go ahead.
So I guess that has been something that was discussed on the list, and but at the end of the day, the community, we ended up moving ahead and restoring. Certainly, if the community wants to continue to change the waitlist policy, I recommend proposals to do that. I just wanted to know how involved you were in the process at that point, and that's helpful to know.
Well, and we're learning how to become more involved. And we have talked to several folks that are on the advisory council, and we plan to work with them and get them more out here.
It's your registry. Let's get some policy that works for you.
Thanks.
All right, front center microphone.
Chris Tassett, Tassett Law, ARIN-AC. I oppose this policy at least at this time because I think it's contrary to ARIN's ethos of needs-based provision of resources. There are a lot of startups and small ISPs who might either not be in business or whose business plans would be delayed significantly if they didn't have access to the wait list. That's why it's there, and I think we need to sustain it, especially when there is no scarcity in the other pools. I think if there was a contest between this wait list and other pools, then that might be worthy of a discussion and perhaps recalibration. But as was pointed out, there is no problem anywhere else, so I don't think we should pass a policy that is meeting actual needs in order to fulfill a speculative need that may never materialize. Thank you.
Thank you. Rear microphone.
John Sweeting, ARIN staff. I think I'm going to answer Joe's question. So in the 410 pool, there are IP pool. Sorry, Kathy. There are 15,727 /24s left. 657 have been used over the time since it was implemented. And it's about an average between 10 and 15 a month. On the 4.4, there's 123 issued, 389 left, and about 1.5 per month, so maybe 15 to 18 a year.
Thank you, John.
I think the numbers speak more than the percentage.
Joe?
Joe Provo, Google, ARIN-AC. Please don't walk away, John. You got almost all my numbers I was going to ask you for.
What's the other
He reads my mind. I was going to ask also, what is the projected run rate based on past performance? I think you shared that with us before, so I just want to make sure
Well,
this
yeah, so
audience
it's
hears.
about 15 a month on the 410, so it'd be about 1,000 months before 15,000 would go out.
And
on the 4.4, it's like 1.5 a month, so there's 389, 260 months.
so I'd say I oppose policy as written, oppose as intended, and in a couple of hundred months, maybe we revisit what we need to do there.
All right, rear microphone.
Oh, you can go first.
All right, go ahead.
Matthew Wilder, Tellus. I like the idea and also would hope to see these addresses set aside for future purposes and not immediately allocated to 4.10 necessarily. Alternatively, I would also be interested in introducing a qualification for the waiting list to stipulate that IPv6 must be deployed in order to qualify. I have another one.
Go right ahead.
Gary Burmaster. I think what Kevin mentioned has value. Fill the reserve pools up to whatever the community agreed was the appropriate size first, and only then make them available to the waiting list. This would be an ongoing process. For example, if addresses go out of the critical infrastructure pool, then it gets placed at the head of the end of the grandparent line to get new returned addresses first, well after the grandparents.
Thank you. Rear microphone.
Okay, Kevin Locke, QTS again. I do support this again. Several people have commented that they're concerned about addresses being stranded in this pool. There's already too many, for the current run rate. Remember, they can always be reallocated to other uses, other pools in the future. And I think putting them in this bucket, the fact that the run rate is so low does further my goal of ARIN building up a pool of addresses for future currently unknown uses.
Thank you. Front center.
Scott Johnson, SolarNet 1. So fundamentally, we can all probably agree that IPv4 has some irreconcilable flaws that IPv6 addresses. For close to 3 decades now, the IETF has been working this problem. I personally was part of the 6-bone with the 3FFE deployment, and I have worked in an engineering fashion to help implement IPv6 throughout the time period since, including implementing it on all my networks and encouraging all other network operators and owners to implement it. I think in arguing over semantics and construction of the mechanism to fight over the scraps of a system that we have engineered a replacement for is the wrong course of action for the community as a whole. I believe that moving in a direction that will allow implementation of IPv6 as a replacement for IPv4 where practicable, and that includes the IETF working toward, say, replacing dotted quad as a requirement for a router identifier, is probably the best course of action, and it will allow all of us to have the necessary resources we have in functionally infinite fashion to address every device that we need to bring online. The roadblock has primarily been commercial forces, as represented by essentially edge providers and others who have monetized IPv4 and do not want to give up that financial stream. And this is holding us back as a community and an internet. Thank you.
Thank you. Front center again.
Hi, Aaron Hughes, 6 Connect. I guess first, a question of clarity is what is the intent of this policy? proposal is the discussion about what to do with reclaimed space, or is this, I mean, you know, versus, say, the waiting list, versus the question of putting things in 404 or 410, and I'll add the reason that I asked the question.
Okay.
If we add something to say 410, it then becomes non-transferable by policy today, and it makes it very difficult for us to discern the difference based on the allocated resource. Tracking that as operators for us is challenging. Then we have to do extra verification with the RIR to say, hey, is this a block that we can actually transfer by policy? We don't know based on which pool it's coming out of, as one simple example.
Okay, so thank you for the question. So when the policy was submitted, the intent of the policy was to correct an inconsistent stream of IP address space coming back to the wait list. So the original intent was to correct that issue and effectively take the IP addresses that were coming back and put them into an IP pool that would be used under policy and eliminate the wait list so that there wasn't this inconsistent stream of coming in and going out. And I don't think the original policy stated that it would go to the transfer market, but that would be, if you look holistically at this policy, that is a consequence of the intent. Does that answer your question?
It does. So
Okay.
then my feedback on this is, I don't think we should put anything else in the 4.10 or 4.4 pools. I think conversations about more creative ways to figure out how to get what we want out of this community, the collective community, would be better focused on what kind of carrots would be forward progress. So hypothetically, if a carrot is V6 adoption, even if we have something like a waiting list, maybe we have a requirement that there is a visible public host of service that is V6 accessible. People need V4 resources for other reasons. People certainly want them on the transfer market. And while we're trying to protect ourselves from some level of fraud, we certainly want to get V4 resources out there and where they need to be appropriately. So maybe it's time to explore some other carrots.
Thank you. All right, last call for the microphones and remote, and going over to the far microphone.
Kevin Morgan, Stratus Networks. If I understand the policy correct, there was a grandfathering of the people that are on the list in this policy. And I guess I just have a question, why? What is the rationale behind grandfathering them?
So I guess maybe John should speak to the rationale, but when we put this policy together and made it fair and impartial, we felt that it was the way this policy was written, fair to implement this policy after those on the waiting list had received their IP address space based on the needs.
I think you just proved the point of what my partner had spoken about, fairness.
John?
Yeah, actually, I was trying to figure out how to say the same thing in a different way. So the advisory council, when the advisory council did 2019-17, the waitlist resumption, it took care to make sure the people on the list had the option to reset their existing request if it was larger than /22, that we would ask each party, if you were looking for more than a /22, you can get asked to only get a 22, and so that aspect of grandfathering was considered. What wasn't considered is for the people who had total holdings greater to /20 or greater, and therefore were disqualified under the new policy from getting anything, whether they should be grandfathered. In my history of the recollection of the discussion, I don't know, the AC members may know, but clearly the policy as implemented didn't have language as this did. If it did, we would have implemented it, whatever it said. But because it wasn't that clear, the people who had address holdings /20 or larger were not grandfathered in because this policy wouldn't allow someone else to get that. So I guess I'm proud of the AC for putting specific language in one way or the other for the policy going forward, but for what it already did when we resumed the wait list, it did not contain grandfathering language, so staff did not implement it.
All right, last call again for microphones are now closed, but those in queue, front, center, go ahead.
Owen DeLong, Aaron AC. My recollection of the discussions, and this is me speaking as myself and only about my recollection, is that it was considered and that we decided that the potential for fraud from permitting that extended grandfathering exceeded the benefit. You know, there may be people who disagree, but I believe that was the conclusion we came to, but that we did consider it. And I'm open to being corrected if I'm recalling that incorrectly.
Was that with this policy or the one that?
I think Owen's
No, that was
referring
for
to
the
that.
original waiting list resumption.
Right. And last comment, rear microphone.
Mike Burns, IP Trading. I was the policy author. I just want to provide a little feedback. When I changed the single word from IPv4 block to pool, I didn't consider, you know, certain objections. So I think if that was changed to pool or pools, you know, or IP pool or whatever, that's fine. But also the comments that have been made about the other pools, and I didn't consider those when I authored this policy. So I think, you know, further discussion in terms of, you know, returning addresses to pools other than the 410 pool are worth pursuing. Thanks.
All right. Okay, I'd like to thank world record women's high jumper Allison Wood for her proposal. This was not a recommended draft policy, so by definition, we aren't required to do a show of support hands. But given the nature and length of the discussion, also noting that we're about 8 minutes ahead of time, I will look to the two AC chairs and vice chairs and ask if you would like to see a show of numbers of support or not, if you feel it's beneficial to you at this time. All right, so we'll do it. This is just for informational purposes only, to guide them in their further discussions. So, those in favor of this proposal, please raise your hand. And also remind those online, either for or against, to put your comments in now. All right, thank you. And those against this proposal, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. So between policies, John, I got a text message from Nancy Carter. As you know, she's not here yet. She's on her way. But she had a question for you.
Well.
She wanted to know if you knew why spiders make great web developers.
I do not know. Why do spiders make great web developers?
Because they love finding bugs. Is she here now? Okay. She sent it to me when she was on the way. So.
I'd step out before I told that joke.
All right. Total in the room, 110. In favor, 3. Against, 19. Will be given to the Advisory Council in an informational capacity.
Thank you. Excellent job.